Hello, everybody. Welcome to SmartCom Summit. The session today is about AI and the future of CX. And I'm here today with Tom Go of Lumin.ai and Kevin Nethercott of the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance. Welcome, gentlemen.
It's good to be here. Thanks, Rob.
Good morning.
Great, and the sound is working. That's also great. So our fourth speaker, Iain Scholnick of Braidio, unfortunately had to cancel last minute. He's actually sick today. So it's going to be the three of us discussing CX and AI and well, the future of the world as we know it. And I'd like to start with you, Tom, because I understand that you've been in the world of AI or machine learning or conversational intelligence or whatever name we want to give it for a long time, going back to spending some time at Disney R&D and some other cool stuff that I saw in your LinkedIn profile when we did some research. So I'd love to hear from you a bit of your background and also what does this AI thing mean to you today?
You bet. Well, thanks, Rob. And first of all, I just wanted to say good morning to all of you fellow West Coasters. If you got up at 7 in the morning for this, you must love this as much as I do. And so for the East Coasters, maybe you can forgive a few slips here and there as we all wake up. So my background spans innovation. So post-PhD, I went immediately to work for Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, who had bankrolled a commercial research lab that became an incubator, one of the first incubators. And since then, I've had a number of positions, including co-managing the research labs at the Walt Disney Company. But I've also spent quite a bit of time publishing, early in my career, academic style publishing in a number of fields, and also have invested a significant part of my life into startups and early stage company formation for myself and for others. And we could talk about what I've done. That's not as interesting as what makes me tick. I'll just say a little bit about that. I think an indication of how far I've gone off the deep end is I had a dream last night in which my life depended on whether unconscious matter behaves deterministically. So take that for what it will. But I've had number one driver for me has been a lifelong interest in what makes life tick. Hence, I did my PhD in biophysics out to what makes intelligence tick. And a second thing that has driven me is largely that I really do feel that technology has come between us and being human. Technology interferes with, in many ways, the aspects of our humanity that matter the most to us. And so I've really dedicated my career to solving those problems. But you're right. Very, very early on, I had some of my very first experiences with machine learning were in the early 90s, publishing papers on teaching virtual creatures to walk. Fascinating to see my creatures wake up in the morning, metaphorically, and figure out how to walk and cartwheel. And I've applied very similar techniques to later problems like the cocktail party effect, where we hear multiple speakers talking at once and we can separate them mentally. And so there's a big technological dimension to my background, but also for the last 6 years, we have been using conversational AI in a sales context. And so have a lot of sensitivity to what our users really need and value commercially and in practice. And so really all about connecting those dots, and can't wait for some of these topics to come up in our conversation.
Okay, that's intriguing, Tom. So let me just start with this first really simple question. What does AI mean?
Well, that's such an interesting question because
I thought it was a simple question.
Well, I'll try not to give you more than you bargained for here, but the term AI has become so skewed over the past couple of decades. AI, broadly speaking, applies to all technologies that help a computer perform functions that are normally thought to be the domain of a human being. And so there are many implementations of AI, ranging from symbolic to connectionist. Neural networks are an example of a connectionist technology and have certain advantages and disadvantages. And then within the world of neural nets, you have many different flavors going all the way to deep neural nets. And in the taxonomy above neural nets, you have technologies that are machine learning. So not all AI is machine learning, and not all machine learning is neural nets. There are many other ways to accomplish machine learning, and there are many other ways to accomplish AI.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure if it's clearer now. Let me give an example. So I'm one of those, I think, 5 million people that's been playing with ChatGPT over the past 2 weeks, right? So I'm using blogs with it. I'm writing blogs with it. I'm writing event summaries. I'm not doing my homework with it. I'm trying to keep my kids from using it. I haven't told them where they can get on, but I understand that. I mean, this is taking the world by storm, and it's a very distinct. I think it's a bit of a game changer. What's your view on that?
Technologies of the cloud. By the way, ChatGPT is amazing. I've been playing with it as well, and it does a really, really good job of. I mean, it's clearly read the internet, and it knows how to assemble facts together in a way that's very, very credible. Now, there are certain things that connectionist AI is very good for, and they have to do with classification problems in which the boundaries tend to be very, very difficult for a human being to describe. And there are examples of, I mentioned at the beginning, teaching my virtual creatures to walk and cartwheel while riding a bike is a very, very good example of something that cannot be described very easily in words. Now, conversely, there are so many important technologies. You think of what Mathematica has accomplished, for instance, performing algebra, higher level calculus. These technologies require symbolic AI because there are certain problems in which absolute precision is required, where transparency is paramount. You cannot take a neural net apart and understand why it made its decisions. And this is leading to many ethical problems that I think we're all familiar with. And it's not controllable either. So if you have a region of your input space that the neural net is not handling well, all you can do is throw more training data at it. There's no way to do surgery on a neural net.
Right.
So that there is a spectrum, and I do think that we have overinvested as a world community in the connectionist models.
So if we take it then to the world of CX, or customer engagement and customer experience, I think we can talk about the definition of that for another 2 hours. But let's focus in on chatbots. I remember, I'm old enough to remember the days that chatbots were promised to us users as a great way to interact with brands, with enterprises. And I must say that that's not always been my experience when I engage with my local bank or airline. I don't always find them very helpful. So, and I'm sure there are variations, and there are ways to do it better. Can you give some examples on and how AI applies to this and what you do at Lumen also, I guess?
Yeah, you bet. Well, thank you. Chatbots as a class of technologies can use AI at many different levels of the architecture. And the place where we see AI the most commonly applied is in simply recognizing or understanding the natural language that somebody uses as input. And it's often the case that above that layer, after the recognition stage, the entire logic of the conversation is governed by a decision tree or a flow chart. And if you can imagine us in this conversation now trying to govern our decisions about what to say next by a flow chart, we'd have people dropping off like flies from this conversation. In fact, maybe they already are, but who knows? But the rigidity of a decision tree approach to conversational AI is exactly the source of the frustration that you and I both experience when we try to interact with some of the commercially available bots. And so, thanks for the opportunity for a shameless plug. But we at Lumen have really cracked the nut on some of that higher level conversational intelligence to incorporate the ability to perform free-form dialogue, the ability to incorporate context, and in fact, the ability to incorporate multiple agents in the conversation. So these are the characteristics of what I would regard as second, third, and fourth generation AI in a conversational context.
And then you're saying the conversation and the chat actually becomes natural and useful.
Yes, exactly. So in our particular context, where we are helping sales teams engage with their prospects, what context means is, for example, somebody mentions a concern about pricing at the beginning of a conversation. Well, near the end of the conversation, when our system is about to engage them with a human being, we can say, well, Rob, I remember that you had some concerns about pricing. Rob, when Rob talks to you, you can certainly cover that together. And so that's a little bit of context that surfaces much later in the conversation, as opposed to being a direct response to the question just posed. And that simple application of context really creates a sense of relationship between the person and the machine, and indeed builds a relationship between the visitor and the human being that they're about to engage with, because after all, that's what we're brokering in our business.
Right. That's fascinating. Kevin, over to you. Because you've been on a slightly different side of this, I think. Maybe you can give us a little bit of your background and what you're doing right now at the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, and how you see, let's say, AI applied there, and what the challenges are in that world.
Yeah, grateful to be here, and Tom, thanks for all that deep background. Now, hopefully, you can help me understand how we can apply it within the carrier space and around the world, and look at how we can scale it. I think that's really where we're at now, is that there's a lot of this really cool technology out there, but how do we really get it out to the masses? And as we look at that, that's really one of the things that we're focusing on at the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, is helping get technology into the hands of carriers, telephone companies around the world, where they can leverage their networks, the data that they have, all the resources that they have, and be able to take that and apply it at the endpoint, which is the customer, right? And so it's really intriguing to see the depth of this technology, but how does it get applied, right? And so I think those are the critical areas that are interesting. I think as we look at traditional telephony platforms, so whether that's UCaaS, contact center with CCaaS, and now kind of the glue that's holding those together and moving us into this next generation is now CPaaS, right? And so I think right now, if I think about the customer experience, there's a couple of key points. I think one is that in the environment we're in today, it's absolutely critical that we meet the consumer where they're at, right? So what channel are they on? Do they prefer a voice call? Are they on Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, SMS? hopefully sooner rather than later, we're on RCS and more advanced messaging platforms from the carriers, which I have great faith in that's where we're headed, and are really going to improve the customer experience because of that. But how does the technology that Tom's describing access those channels? Because as a consumer, that's where I'm at, right? That's my interface. That's my experience. And so I think that's a critical area to consider, how that ties together. Maybe we want to go a little deeper on chatbots, because that seems to be, at least today, the interface, right? So when I come into a consumer experience on a website, I'm usually greeted by a bot, and a very dumb bot at that, right? Maybe they can tell me where the office is and what time they're open. So Tom, how do I take what you're describing and apply it into my world of how I connect to the consumer? I know that you've worked with a number of CPaaS platforms, so maybe tell me a little bit. We don't need to go too deep on the technology of how you do it, but I would like to understand, because I think there's a lot of carriers out there that would really be interested in this. If I have a CPaaS platform, could I tie someone like Lumin into that to provide these types of experiences? So maybe just connect the dots a little for me on how we go from this deep technology actually to connect to my network, and then ultimately to the consumer.
That's a great, yeah.
Tom, before you answer the question, I think from what my understanding, Kevin, is a lot of CPaaS effort has gone into this multi-channel or omni-channel challenge, right? Just
Absolutely.
sort of connecting the technical channels, which is complicated enough, connecting that somehow somewhere, but not enough attention maybe has been given to what you do once you have those channels connected.
Right.
And how does it all work? And again, coming back to my point, I think there are some very powerful platforms out there for large enterprises who have lots of developers who have the skills to work with. But 90% of enterprises, of businesses, are small. They don't have those capabilities. So that's the part I find so fascinating. There's this technology that apparently is getting pretty advanced and smart and clever and useful. How do we get it? How do we give it into the hands of the smaller companies around the world? So Tom, over to you. Help us out here, please.
This is such an interesting space to be talking. Traditionally, our functions are very siloed, right? So technologists think about implementation. Right. And in the world where I think all three of us live, we've all realized that the job of a technologist is still very, very centered on the customer experience. So it's connecting the dots between the capabilities of our current platforms and how we can make life better. And so if we think about communication, that's so core to how we live our lives. So you and I have natural behaviors that we've adopted, even before we ever utter a term like CPaaS. So we've all gone to texting our friends. When we set up this panel, we never had a voice call to set it up. We used asynchronous methods because we were being polite to each other about our time. And so the core responsibility of a technologist is really about understanding the human context in which the technology resides. And I think one of the main themes that has emerged for all of us is the concept of respectful communication. Now, respectful communication means a lot more than saying thank you and hello. It means being very, very sensitive to when a person is ready to engage, how much they know at the point where they're ready to engage. Concrete example here, we're reaching out to somebody for a big decision. In many of the customer cases that we work with, people are making a $500,000 to $1 million decision on the purchase of a home or a business. Well, maybe they need to talk to their significant other first. Maybe they're in the middle of doing something else. They're at dinner, and they need the time to engage with their relationships before actually responding. And so we need technology that is sensitive to that and understands when is the right time to to get an engagement. Very, very simple thing that that we've all, I think, tried to do is take better advantage of messaging. Our customers tend to, if they're coming from the old world, they're just hammering their prospects with cold calls. And that flies completely in the face of everything we just said. And CPaaS has been a truly powerful enabling technology for companies like ours, because it's given us the ability to interconnect with the telecom infrastructure and offer messaging via various mediums without having to worry one whit about how it all happens. Right. Now, as far as different channels are concerned, we're seeing in different markets, we have WhatsApp, others we have SMS. But the common feature of all of these is, in the US at least, SMS is the largest social media platform in the world. You know that everybody's on it. And so the ability, there's a huge difference between a web chat, which is glued to a web page, and a SMS conversation, which effectively can be torn off the page and go around with the individual for days and weeks. To the moment where maybe they're bored in the airport and they have a moment to answer a chat. So I think these are some of the themes that really come up in the context of respectful communication, even before you start talking about the actual content of the chat.
I like that. I think a lot of sales would benefit from this concept in general, even without the bots, because it's the key thing, right? It's when everybody who's in sales has this same challenge. When do you engage? When do you feel? How do you nurture relations? It's very complicated. It's very. There's cultural differences. There's technology issues. There's all this stuff. If technology could help us get there, that would be amazing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where we start to, leak into the SME portion of this, right? Because if technology can do that, now it scales. So if I have a flower shop, I can use those same capabilities to engage around Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, and use this type of technology to be sensitive of their time, the culture, the timing, knowing what the holiday is, and then being able to bring that into to closing the sale, right? So I don't know, Tom, with your experience, what percentage of the sale does Lumen enable? I mean, are we at 50% of the process, 70%, 90%? How far along that path are you able to take the end user to the ultimate goal of getting them closed for whatever the objective might be?
Well, salespeople think in terms of conversion rates in their funnels. So they may start with, 1,000 leads, and this is a pretty common number for one person to handle in a month. 1,000 leads funneling down to meetings with maybe 100 of them, funneling down to maybe 2 sales, something like that. So if we're talking about how far we're able to get people progressed, you really talk about it in terms of ratios. So how can one human being possibly place, it takes on average, 5 to 7 contacts to get in touch with somebody via cold calling. So we're talking about 5,000 to 7,000 calls per month. If we're going to do this completely without the help of AI. And so what we're able to do is help the salesperson focus on the 8 to 10% of the initial leads that really deserve their human attention. And so you can regard that, if you like, as 90% of the challenge, because we've winnowed out the 90% of the chaff. But there is a long way to go. And then you can attach dollar amounts to each of these. Take the value of a sale and work backwards through the conversion rates to see the value of an actual meeting. And then, even more importantly, this is not only about the humanity of the prospect, but also of the salesperson. What is their job description? Every profession we know has aspects that people hate, but are necessary parts of the job. So if you're a top flight cook, you might do your wash your own dishes, or if you're a mechanic, maybe it's the tinkering with the car that you love, but there's always a cleanup at the end. And for a salesperson, this is 60 to 70% of the time just hammering and getting answers from people who don't want to talk to you. So it's partly about that as well.
Right.
To the SME point, this stuff is really hard to build, and so there's a whole range of solutions now. I think, Rob, to your point, giving medium-sized enterprises the ability to do a lot of customization on their own, and then as you go down market, you're talking more about turnkey. So in the CPaaS world, we're used to selling a deal and having it take months and months and months to start to show any ROI at all. And so in this world, you can actually plug somebody in turnkey and then have them produce pretty close to the maximum attainable value within 2 to 4 weeks. So it's completely changing the timing of these decisions as well.
Right. This actually might be a good time to pitch a panel that we'll have after the holidays, Tom. I know that we're planning to have you and a couple of your partners and customers on a panel to actually get into the details of the commercial side of all of this. So, we'll leave that as a quick advertisement for a future panel as well. But that's very helpful. I did have a question. When I look at the communication space, we're talking a lot about messaging, which is clearly the growth area of our communications, right? Whether that's personal or professional. But voice is still a really important part of the mix. And so I look at the technologies that many of the call centers and contact centers are now deploying. And, there's an experience recently that I had with a pizza shop that has implemented some advanced capabilities within their contact center, where they are now doing sentiment analysis real time on the voice calls that are coming in to order pizza. And so they were able to take real time data from these conversations and in real time understand that people weren't ordering mushrooms as much as they were green peppers. And so it was amazing to me the amount of data and analytics that's available now. For me as a business owner, I can now make much more educated real-time decisions based on some of these AI patterns that are now built into products. So I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit around how AI could work in a voice world, maybe something around how it works with sentiment analysis, so that as a business owner, I can make quicker decisions, right? If I know real time that I've got an upset customer, I can make different decisions that are really going to change that customer experience, right? So I think that some of these capabilities in the background really can enhance the experience for me as a consumer. So I was curious if you could maybe share some thoughts on how that works and some of the directions you see that coming in the future.
In a sales context like the one you talked about, there's a progression of relationship depth. So at the very beginning, somebody may be window shopping and hands off, particularly for a large purchase, and then they get further along, and it becomes necessary to convey, some subtle thoughts. It becomes necessary to have more of an interactive conversation, and so. Typically, the way the sales journey goes is at the very beginning, messaging makes the most sense because the prospect has a very light commitment. Now, in the case of the pizza, they're already on a mission. They want the green pep. They want the veggie pizza. And I don't know what they're thinking about skipping the mushrooms. That makes no sense to me at all. But that's a separate panel. There's a point later, even with a big ticket sale, where you go from messaging to voice as the medium, because there's no longer an issue of commitment. And now it's an issue of being able to communicate subtleties, to be able to come back for clarifications. And then you get past the automated voice phase and you've got the human voice phase. In many sales cycles, you're going to skip over the automated voice. But if you're a high volume, low value, your ticket sales are like $20 instead of 200,000. Well, you're going to use automation. And there's a tremendous amount you can do, even in the conversation we're having now. If you listen to the pitch track of our speech, that's called the F0 in speech. It's the fundamental frequency. You can understand when people are emphasizing a point, when they're excited, when they're joking, when they're a little upset with each other. Yes, there's an awful lot you can do with sentiment analysis. As you pointed out in the content, we have customers constantly asking us, which of my lead sources are performing the best? Because I'm going to adjust my spend on those leads. Absolutely, I think there's scope there. Rob, I see you.
I'm thinking that, of course, after text and voice, of course, the next level, if you will, is video.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure there's even more cues that you can get from the video. So that becomes the whole picture then, I think, right? If when you talk about CX, it's not just chat or text anymore. You need to cover that whole range of channels, including speech and video.
It's so interesting to hear how people talk about voice and video. Video is a much, much richer way of engaging, as we see here today. We often will hear a sales team say that early in the process, they don't want video. They would rather leave something as a voice call because they're still evaluating the relationship. And video socially sort of commits them to a much longer conversation. Something that could have been a 10-minute phone call turns into a 45-minute video simply because it's harder to end a video call. And so the choice of channels often has to be meshed in very carefully with the social context of the relationship.
I want to bring it back to let's say the first where we started, right? Is AI the future of CX? Or let's turn it around. Is there CX a really good customer engagement? Is that possible even without AI? Because when I listen to you, Tom, and when I think about all the possibilities that are there certainly for larger enterprises with larger budgets, with more development power, with more smart people on board. I mean, this is where it's going to go. And in order to be effective and to be efficient in your whole in your sales process and your customer engagement in general, these sort of technologies will become a requirement.
I'm curious about what both of you have observed about this, but AI can be applied in the same sense that communication technologies can be applied in a way that tears people apart and that flies against their their aspirations. The use of AI in analytics is very similar. So, I hate it when I've just bought a pair of shoes, and after the shoes show, after I buy the shoes, that's when I get all the ads for the same pair. That's not useful for either the vendor or for me. But on the other hand, I think that some of our e-commerce vendors have really started to understand what my purchasing patterns are going to be like. So I, log on to Amazon, and there are all kinds of USB cords on there because that's all I ever seem to buy. So the ability of it's so much more important for AI to be able to predict what a person wants than to simply echo back to them what they've already done. And I think that's one of the main pillars of a well-applied AI strategy.
Right. And then going back to, let's say, the go-to-market, the point that Kevin raised earlier. How are we going to get this this sort of technology in the hands of, let's say, the 90% of the enterprises and businesses that are not large enterprises?
Well, I think that is the question, right?
Yeah.
And I think companies like Lumen are on the edge of their seat to understand, how do we scale that, right? So it comes back down to the usability, right? So that low code, no code, turnkey, we have a number of different terms of how we might describe this, but that becomes critical. It is the user experience that sells the product, right? And so though we're talking about customer experience, the actual products and services themselves have to be delivered in a way that me as a business owner, I don't have an IT guy. It's my brother-in-law, right? And so I don't want to call him. And
Right.
so I'm really stuck as a business owner having to do this myself. And so that's where we need to get to really get this to scale. Once we get to that point, then there's, I think, natural channels that sell direct. I think we see more and more marketplaces where we're going to see more and more commerce done, virtually, as we have, from a consumer perspective. That's going to happen now in a B2B environment. And so being able to put this technology, these services into a marketplace where I can come in as a business owner, discover it. So not only is it the technology, but what is my go-to-market? What's my messaging? How do I market this? Becomes, I would say, maybe even more important in many respects to scale this. And so it really is the 360 degrees of business that need to be applied here. So the AI has to be cool. It has to work. It has to be easy to consume. But even if I have those two things nailed, myself as a business owner may not know they even exist. And so, you really need to think through how do you drive this technology and make it discoverable so that I can easily engage and use it as a tool. Because I think with technology, with cloud, we can get the price points that are really interesting. So that as a business owner, again, I'm fine, paying $100 to $500 a month for something that really makes my business much more efficient, makes it easier for my customers to find me, to interact with me, like me, and but those are the elements that we've got to kind of pull together to make that all happen.
Yeah. Wow, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. If you look at how messaging, AI-based messaging technologies are sold, the buyer has changed dramatically in the past few years. So traditionally, a CSP will be selling, or through channel, will be selling to the IT department. Right. And so the IT department is looking at buying minutes and messages with prices that start with a dot and have zeros after them. Way south of, say a fraction of a penny per text. And yet you go to the business buyer, and I just did some quick math, and it turns out that the value per text that our customers derive is on the order of $20 to $50. So that's a really big margin spread between the fraction of a penny and the $20 to $50, which can be diced up in a fair way between the ultimate beneficiary and the technology provider. But in order to accomplish that, you have to sell to the line of business. The customer is now the chief marketing officer. And as you go down to the SME level, the customer might be the CEO, might be the shop owner who's literally out there baking the bread. And so as you get to that, there are really at least 3 different responsibilities I can think of for the product organization. So we've talked about building, right? So building these systems is hard. That's why no code helps. There's selling, which we just talked about. It's a different audience. But I'm going to shine a light on a third one here, which is finding that product market fit. There's the classic way of doing technology innovation, which is to dream up a big system, build it for months and months and years, pour millions of dollars into it, and then sell it, then try to sell it. And so that waterfall approach, the traditional non-lean approach, is clearly not working, which is why there's such a big movement over the past 10 years or so that goes under the guise of lean startup, or call it what you will. It's been around for much longer than that. But the point here is how can you identify the right product that really conforms to what your customers want? And so the most powerful place where the combination of AI and no code can be used is actually before a product ever hits the market. To make this point, I'll just give an analogy that has nothing to do with coding and nothing to do with AI. So I served as chief product officer for a while for Idea Lab, which is one of the earliest incubators. And so Bill Gross, the CEO of Idea Lab, is just an idea machine. He comes up with 1,000 things a year. And so I'll tell a couple anecdotes about him. And these are stories that he loves to tell himself. So I feel like I'm not revealing any confidences. But there was a point where he was really, really interested in making a scale to help dieters. And so you'd stick the scale under your plate. And there were 2 really easy tests that we did early on in the development of that idea. One of them was to do some reverse shoplifting. So we had an intern go and buy a product that was similar in shape and size, carefully cut the edges of the packaging, and replace it with a highly designed backing for the product that he wanted to sell. And inside it, he put a wooden very carefully painted effigy of the thing. He went back into the store and did his reverse shoplifting, stuck it on the shelf, and then he stood there for a whole day to see how people would react. And guess what? People swarmed around to the left and the right of this thing and never picked up this scale. Well, so that's one fact. And then the second thing was, we said, Bill, we had a designer make out of wood a model of what he planned to sell. And we said, Bill, why don't you carry this around with you and stick it under your plate when you go to Il Fornaio for a lunch? He never did it. He never did it because it was too embarrassing, or maybe not embarrassing, but he would have had to explain what he was doing, and he didn't. That's not how he wanted to spend the time over lunch. So both of these very, very early stage tests indicated that this would, no matter how good the product was, it wasn't going to fly. And in the software space, you have a very similar dynamic where there are very, very cheap things you can do to get things in front of the customer and understand what the customer experience means for them in full context, as we've been talking about. And so no-code, low-code technologies, those are revolutionizing our ability as an industry to test the waters and iterate a product until it's bang, right on. And then we build the real thing and take it to market. Or maybe we leave it as no code. There's some product categories where that works.
Yeah.
So really fascinating topic. It's a panel on its own.
Yeah. Well, it is really fascinating. I see that we're coming up at the end of the 45 minutes that we had for this. We're going to have, as Kevin already mentioned, we're going to have another panel session with you, Tom, in a couple of weeks to talk more about this subject. I'd like to thank both of you very much for being here this early on your side, Tom, and a little bit later, but still early where you are, Kevin. It's end of the day almost for me over here in Europe. So it's been great talking to you. I wish both of you a great day, and I look forward to talking to you soon again.
Thanks so much for the stimulating conversation. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to go crawl back into bed now.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Thanks Tom.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.